Okay, welcome to the skills class at Hadran, which is geared toward the Seder learning this year, which is going to be a very exciting way to prepare for Seder, probably different than you normally do. The way the course is going to work, as you all learned, some more easily, some more complicated, that the course lives on the Hadran course website, which is basically going to work is that you're going to come on the class every day, every week when you come on. Or if you're doing it on your own, I know there's a lot of people out there who are going to be learning this course on their own time. This will be available for forever now on our site. So anyone who wants to take the course going forward, it will be available. You come in every day through the course, you click on the lesson, and when you're in the lesson, you can access the materials for that lesson. Every day we will provide a PDF of the Gemara itself if you would like to learn from a regular Gemara. The best way to do this course, if you want to learn skills, is to use a regular Gemara, not a Schottenstein, not a Koreh, not a Steinsaltz, any kind of commentary, because the way to really learn Gemara is not to have somebody translate it for you. Once somebody translates it, so number one, you're already reading a translation. So it's harder to think clearly about what you think the text is saying when someone already told you what the text is saying. So that's number one. Number two, part of the problem or complicated nature of Gemara is that a page of Gemara looks, here I'll pull one up on the screen, looks like this, which is kind of complicated. If you notice, I'll give you a little bit of an explanation for those who Gemara is new to you. And even if you don't understand Hebrew, which not to worry, I'll get to all the people who don't understand Hebrew. We are providing help for anyone who doesn't understand Hebrew also. So this inside part is the middle text of the Gemara where I'm putting my mouse. Okay, this little rectangle in the middle, that is the Gemara itself. It starts off, every chapter of the Talmud starts off with Mishna, and then even throughout, there's always more Mishnas that are then explained by the Gemara. So the Gemara then, so right here, the first few lines are the Mishnah. We're starting the 10th parak. You can see here. Here, I'll put it down. So at the top of the page, it says Parak Asiri. That means we're in the 10th parak. Arvei Psachim over here is the name of the parak. Tzadi Tet Amud Bet is the page that we're on. It's Tzadi Tet Bet, which means it's the second side of page 99. Tzadi Tet is 99. And here it tells you you're in Masechet Psachim, which I guess I should have started with. And the inner part here, which you can't tell because you don't have the book open. If you do, then you'll see. The inner part is Rashi. The outer part is Tosfot. But specifically in this chapter, Rashi is usually the main commentary used. In this chapter, it's actually going to be, you can see it says lower down, Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel Talmid Rashi. This was actually his grandson, the Rashbam. And that's the commentary at the bottom of the page. We're going to use it because for some reason, I don't know the exact reason, but for some reason in this chapter, Rashi is very short and the Rashbam goes more in depth and into detail. Okay, what we did here to make it easy for those who want to use this as your page, and this is in the Chavruta section that you'll see on in the course website, is that here we underline, this is the section we'll be learning today. Today is just Mishnah, so anyone who's a little scared by Gemara today, we're actually just going to do Mishnah, but it's not going to be so simple. We're going to go very in-depth into the Mishnah and have a lesson in what it is to learn the Mishnah in depth and ask lots of questions. So again, just to do a little bit more background before we get started. So again, every class you're going to find in the material section, you'll find all the materials. Every class will be split up into three. I will be doing an introduction. Then we're going to stop for Chavruta. Then so again, Chavruta means independent study. So if you're learning this here, we're going to break up into breakout rooms. If you're doing it online, you can do it on your own or find a friend who can take the course with you. And then you do the Chavruta part, and then you come back. There'll be a second video if you're doing this online, and if you're here on the Zoom. So we'll come back together from the breakout rooms. We'll go over the material that we did and delve a little bit more in depth, more than what you did in the Chavruta. And then I'm going to send you back to Chavruta again. And then the Chavruta will be about 10 to 15 minutes. They're geared, they're very well explained to the extent that the idea is you should be able to get through things on your own. If you have questions, you can try to ask through the chat. I can't promise to be able to get to all of them, but if not, you just go on, okay? You don't get stuck on anything and spend too long. You can just move on. Even if you don't understand, you'll be able to get through it They're built in such a way. Then we'll finish up with another short shiur to kind of bring everything together. And then when you're finished on your own time, there will be a quiz at the end of every class, a self-checking quiz, so that you can be able to see how you did, do a little review of what we learned, go through some of the words, because a lot of what we're going to have to deal with is a new vocabulary. So we'll do that also. So the quizzes will be able to quiz that. Sometimes it will also be not necessarily a self-checking quiz, but some sort of summary that you'll be asked to do about what we learned. Again, this is all for yourself. It won't be graded, but it's a good way of reviewing the material. Each lesson will be a different topic. Okay, we're going to cover a lot of topics. I chose specifically, there are some topics in this chapter that don't have to do with the Seder, but I chose to do the ones that relate to the Seder. You'll see the beginning part is really going to be before the Seder, and then we're going to get into all different Seder topics. You can see all the topics in the lessons on the site. We're going to be focusing on learning terms, on learning concepts, on learning how to learn Gemara. I know that there's a wide range of abilities of the people sitting in this class. So my goal is to create a class that can be learned on multiple levels. So if your Hebrew is good and you can learn from the Gemara, then go for it. And don't use the English translation if you can, and try to struggle through the text on your own. If Hebrew is an issue, then there'll be other things that you're going to be learning, and everyone is going to come out of the class learning something different. So there's something for everybody here. It will be a class that is multi-level. For example, in the Chavruta, so there's bonus questions. The bonus questions are for people who have already finished the material, while other people are probably still getting through it. And those bonus questions will be for you, for those who can do more advanced things, and they'll be able to see more text inside. But those who don't do the bonus questions won't really lose out, because you'll be learning that material together in the class with me and with everyone together. Okay. So we'll get a little bit more to Chavruta, a little bit more about Chavruta before I send you off to Chavruta. Okay, again, I gave you a little bit of an intro about what the page looks like. Okay, so for someone who's never learned Gemara, this page might look a little bit intimidating, but hopefully by the end of the course, you'll be a little more familiar with the structure of the page. I'll just go back to the page for a quick minute and show you that there's all sorts of things also on the sides of the page. Okay, notice there's a lot of different elements on the sides of the pages. These are more commentaries or comments. We'll maybe go through them at other times during the course, or maybe that'll have to wait for the second mini series that we do. But again, the main text is in the center, and we have commentaries on the side. The main commentaries we're going to deal with, as I said, are the Rashbam, and we're going to get to some of the Tosfot today also, which is another more in-depth commentary on the page, which we'll discuss later today. Okay, just to talk about what is Gemara. So I mentioned that every Gemara starts off with a Mishnah. So a Mishnah is, before we start, actually, I forgot something very important, which is also something very personal, which is that today's shiur is specifically sponsored by myself and my brothers, John, Adam, and Jeff Cohen, in honor of my mother, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Mom, Mazel Tov. And we're very excited that you're here with us and actually attending your first Gemara class, your first formal Gemara class. So with that, happy birthday, Mom. And now we'll get back to our intro. So what we have here is a text that, okay, we all know there's what we call Torah shebichtav, that's the Torah. We all know there's the 5 books of the Torah. Over time, oral traditions developed. And with that, things were passed down orally. And at a certain point, the rabbis decided things are getting confusing. And it was also around, well, it was actually the destruction happened after this, but the rabbis decided it was time to start collecting the materials and organizing it in an organized fashion, and not just having it all passed down orally. So that is what we call the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah was a conglomeration of things that were put together between the years 0 and 200 approximately. And they were basically put together first orally. It was oral recitations of all sorts of traditions that were going around in those days. Some of them were collected into the Mishnah, and others weren't really collected. So others were collected into a book called the Tosefta. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi is the one who put together the Mishnah. Rabbi Chia is the one who was attributed that he put together the Tosefta. And these were edited versions of many oral traditions that were passed down. And there's many more that never got written down, and they were recited for generations by people. So when we learn the Gemara, which is from the time period from 200 to 500, and then even some of our Gemara that we see today was added onto the basic Gemara, which was kind of finished around the year 500. From 500 to 800, more notes on that were added in. And we have a book that's kind of a combination. When we call it Gemara, it's a combination of things that were written in the time of the Emoraim, as we call them, which are the people living from 200 to 500, and the Svoraim, which are the people who lived from 500 to 800. That kind of takes you till the time of the Geonim, which was the next period. Now, what happened was they discussed what was in the Mishnah, and they extrapolated. And what we're going to do today is we're going to learn a Mishnah, and we're going to train ourselves to ask questions, all sorts of questions on the Mishnah, which are questions that most likely, and you'll see why the Gemara was necessary, because the Mishnah was a nice book that collected lots of opinions, but it didn't include everything. We're going to see in the Gemara that they're going to always be quoting what we call a Braita. A Braita is something that was outside of the Mishnah. It was something from the time period of the Mishnah, from 0 to 200 approximately, and it was something that didn't make it into the book. So basically, people were reciting these orally all the time. So when people were learning in the time of the Gemara, they're always quoting, oh, well, we know this source and we know that source. And the way it works is that the Mishnah and the Braita and the Tosefta and everything from that time period has a higher status. So I always call it, it's kind of like a game where if you say something and you're in Amora, you're living in the time period after that where the Gemara is written, and you contradict something that said earlier, then you're in trouble because you can't go against what was said earlier. And then we have to figure out, well, how does that work out? So this is all just very vague intro. It's hard to do this without actually learning. I'm not a big fan of introductions because I find I can tell you all these things and they'll go in one ear and out the other. Until you see it inside, it's harder to see. So in the Gemara, we're going to have they're constantly quoting sections from the Torah. They're quoting sections from all of the Tanakh. They're quoting sections from the Mishnah. They're quoting sections from Braitot, from all sorts of texts. And they're quoting things that were also discussed in their own time. So that's what we're going to have. The other thing we need to know before I throw you into Chavruta, which I'm going to do in about another minute or two, which is a little bit of background to today's section. Because it's a Mishnah, it's not very complicated. It's written in simple Hebrew. And for those who Hebrew is difficult, I brought the English translation. Very simple concepts in the Mishnah. However, as in all Mishnayot and any text you usually read, there's lots of things that aren't clear. And there's questions that you need to ask. So what I'm going to teach you today is an example of how you take a Mishnah and you ask appropriate questions about that Mishnah. What kind of questions do you ask? And then I'm going to show you where we can go with those questions. What are possible answers to those questions? What do the commentaries do with those questions? So that's basically what our goal is for today. The main thing you need to know is something called Sha'ot Zmaniyot. This is in the time of the Gemara and the Mishnah, and it was also something the Romans did. They divided the day into 12 equal times. They didn't tell time the way we do. They divided the day into 12 equal times, and every hour is basically 1/12 of the day or 1/12 of the night. So this is how we know when we say what, if you ever notice, so when can you say Shema until in the morning? The answer is, if you ask anyone, they'll say, oh, around 9 o'clock, but it's not always 9 o'clock. Sometimes it's 8:30, sometimes it's 9:15. It depends on what time of year it is, how long the day is. If the day begins at 6 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m., then, right, sunrise to sunset, then 3 hours into the day will be 9 o'clock, or chatzot, midday is going to be 12. But you don't always have a perfect day like that. So if we talk about the times of tefillah, what we're going to need to know for today is that there's 2 times of mincha given in the Mishnah, which is one is mincha gedolah and one is mincha ketana. Mincha gedolah means it's the biggest time for mincha. That's why it's called mincha gedolah, which means the earliest possible time you can say mincha is 6.5 hours into the day, which on a day that begins at 6 and ends at 6 would end up at 12:30 in the afternoon. Mincha ketana is called ketana, small mincha, because it's a smaller time. And that's the more ideal time to say it, because really we want you to be saying mincha toward the end of the day. And even though you can say it earlier, and it's totally fine if you want to say it earlier, but that time is going to be it's 3:30 in the afternoon, 9.5 hours into the day. So when we're going to see references to Mincha Gdola and Mincha Ktana, I want you to know what those mean. And basically Mincha Gdola is going to be at 12:30 and Mincha Ktana is going to be at 3:30 in the afternoon. Again, just taking an average day. Okay, what we're going to do right now is we're going to start with Chavruta. The Mishna, the name of our parak is called Arvei Psachim. But if you notice, when you open your text, you're going to see that in the text, it actually says Erev Psachim. Okay, so I'll leave you with a question. You don't have to answer it, but it's a bit of, there's two different versions. Maybe we'll get to it later. We'll see if time permits. One is Arvei Psachim and one is Erev Psachim. It's not the main topic of today, so I'm going to leave that aside for right now. But what we're dealing with is what we call Erev Pesach, which is the day before Pesach. And we're going to start with Leila Seder. Our Mishnah is going to go, our chapter is going to go chronologically. And it's going to start from the afternoon of Pesach, and it's going to go from there into the night of Pesach. And we're basically what we're starting right now is preparations and what one has to do to prepare for the Seder. So with that, I'm going to send you to Chavruta. And I'll just remind you one more thing I wanted to say about Chavruta, which is by the way, if anyone in the meantime wrote to me about who they want to be in Chavruta with, please write to Maggie, because Maggie's setting up the rooms. It might even be too late at this point. So I apologize if you didn't get the Chavruta you wanted because you wrote to me instead of to Maggie. But the other thing, we'll arrange it. Hopefully we'll work this out better for next week if you have an issue. But the other thing that I want you to know about Chavruta, the idea of Chavruta is to sit and learn and discuss. Now, why do you do it with somebody else? Because it allows you to go in depth and to think. If you think on your own, it's not always as easy to think than when you're speaking to somebody else. So the idea of Chavruta is really to delve into the text. The idea is not to finish every page and say, okay, I got through it. The idea of Chavruta is to think and to sit and really think about things and not just to answer the questions. If you don't finish everything, it's absolutely fine. Okay, what I did in the first question, and I want to just give a bit of an intro to that, is I suggested that you think about different questions. I want you first to just read the Mishnah freely. And I want you to start free association and think about, what is this Mishnah saying? I want you to come up with a list of questions I wrote, and I'll just go through them so you understand what I'm looking for. If you don't do this so well, it's okay. You'll learn how to do it better as we go along. But I want you, number one, questions relating to words or terms. What does a word mean? What does a term mean? Maybe it's something you're not familiar with. Number two, questions relating to the reason for the laws. Why is this law mentioned here? Why is this law? Why would this law be the case? Why would they come up with a law like that? Number three, specific definitions that are missing. What didn't the Mishnah tell us that you would have expected the Mishnah to tell you? Or it tells you something, but it's not fully clear what it is they mean by that. Number four, why did they use a particular word? Maybe you could think, theoretically, that word would have worked better than this word. So then you have to wonder, why did they specifically choose that word? So those are all questions that you can start asking on the Mishnah itself when you start Chavruta. And as you go through, you should also pay attention to, when we look at commentaries, try to see what question they're addressing in their words. Okay, we're going to stop here right now. And if you're doing this online and not together with us, so this would be a place where you would stop the video, you would do the Chavruta, and then come back and listen to the next video when you finish the Chavruta.